Hi, folks. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for the Pennsylvania Policy Center State Policy Action Zoom meeting. Really glad to have so many folks joining us today from all across Pennsylvania. My name is Jeff Garris. I am the Outreach and Partnerships Director here at the Pennsylvania Policy Center. I'm joined by a number of my colleagues who are playing critical roles in helping to make this Zoom meeting go as smoothly as possible. A couple things really quickly about the meeting itself. All of the lines except for our panelists and featured speakers are muted and will stay muted throughout the meeting. If you have a question that you would like to ask or pose to any of the panelists and speakers we have today, we invite you to type that in the chat at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You can put that in there and we will get to as many of those as we can. I know that all of our speakers today are very excited about being able to hear from folks about what the concerns are and what the issues are and to provide answers and more information as possible. We host these meetings every month. We do a state policy action Zoom meeting, and we also do one focused on federal issues because there's so much going on right now at the federal level as well. Typically on the first Thursday at 1 p.m., we focus on federal issues, and then on the third Thursday at 1, we focus on the state policy issues. But because of the real crisis that we're seeing now in our state government related to the budget impasse that is now dragged into a third month, we switched the order around. So we're going to focus on state budget today and state policy issues. Again, part of the reason why we call this a policy action meeting is because we talk about policies. Penn Policy Center is a research organization. We provide information on a whole host of policies and proposals that could really do a lot to benefit all Pennsylvanians and people across Pennsylvania. But in addition to policy, we also focus on doing advocacy, because we can have a lot of great ideas on policy, but if we can't figure out a way to advance them and get them implemented, we're not going to be very successful with that. So the focus of these meetings is to talk not just about the policies and to help educate folks about what's at stake in the policies, but to talk about ways that you can take action, possibly even before we wrap up the meeting today. We are recording this meeting and we're streaming it live on our Facebook page. If you miss any part of it, you can go back later and watch that on the Facebook page. And I think we will probably have this up on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. That's a little bit of the housekeeping. Again, if you have a question, type it in the chat. I'm very thankful for my colleague, Adrian, who is helping with providing information in the chat and responding to any challenges, problems, or issues you're having related to the audio and getting questions submitted. Well, we are very excited today because we have some great guest speakers who are helping us focus on some policies and some problems that we're seeing right now. The big problem I think everybody who's attending this meeting today is aware of is the fact that we are now into a third month of the 2025-26 fiscal year for the state of Pennsylvania. That began on July 1st. We are now a week into September, and we still don't have a state budget. This has tremendous implications because there's so many ways that all of the entities that get funded through our state government, all the things that we fund together as citizens, are facing real challenges now. I just saw this morning a Spotlight PA article talking about how rape crisis centers across Pennsylvania are starting to lay off staff because they don't have the resources to pay them because they're not getting the funding that they're supposed to get from the Commonwealth. Just last week, the folks at Pennsylvania State Education Association did a press conference and focused on the fact that there are $1.75 billion that should have gone out to our public schools across Pennsylvania over the last 2 months that have not happened. This is presenting real challenges in a lot of communities, challenges related to transportation. We also know that there are challenges around issues of public transit and a whole host of other policies. But when we don't have a state budget in place, that's when we really start to see, and particularly getting into a second and now third month, this is long overdue. We need a budget. Our students did their assignments last year, took their summer vacation. They've come back. Apparently, some folks in our state Senate did not do their job and have still not finished the job from the past school year of putting into place the budget for Pennsylvania for this year, which affects so many different things. That's the context we're talking about today. There are a lot of questions folks have, a lot of concern about where we are in terms of budget negotiations, what happens next. I'm not going to try to speculate on any of that today because we have some really great speakers with us today who I think can help to shed some light on where things stand right now, what's at stake and what you can do to get involved and to help make sure we get the kind of budget that all Pennsylvanians deserve. We have three guests today with us. We have Representative Jordan Harris, who is elected from the city of Philadelphia, representing the people of the 168th District, but not just representing the people of the 168th District. He is the chairperson of the House Appropriations Committee, which puts him in a very unique position to be able to help think about and to help facilitate putting together the kind of policies that we need around our budgets and our finances here in Pennsylvania. We're really, really pleased to have him here with us today. He is going to have to depart the meeting before we wrap up, and we always aim to wrap up by 2 p.m. So we are going to turn it over to get as much information as we can and to have as many opportunities for you to ask questions. Following Chairman Harris, we are going to hear from Shirlee Howe, who is with Children First and a part of the Pennsylvania Schools Work Coalition. We'll be talking about public education funding and other issues around education. And then we're also going to hear from Gillian Kratzer, who is a deputy director at Better Pennsylvania, who has been doing yeoman's work with other folks all across Pennsylvania, focusing on the real challenges about public transit funding and what would happen if we didn't make the investments that we need to make. So those will be the speakers. Like I said, we'll turn it over first to Chairman Harris. Very glad to have you here with us today. What's going on with the state budget?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to wish we were talking under better circumstances. But as stated, we are now in the month of September, and we do not have a budget here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And what we know is that not having a budget means that many of our nonprofits that do amazing work throughout this Commonwealth aren't receiving the much needed state resources that they get to service people in all 67 counties across this Commonwealth. We've gotten calls and messages and outreach from nonprofits who are taking out lines of credit to continue to operate and do the work that they do, understanding that the interest that they'll bear from those lines of credit won't be covered. We have school districts who have already missed several payments from the basic education funding formula and from special education funds that are not being released because we do not have a General Appropriations Act for this fiscal year. And so what we've done in our caucus, we passed the budget on July the 14th, I believe was the date, that was $1 billion less than what the governor proposed. When the governor made his proposal, we were 100% in support of what the governor proposed, but understanding that we have a humble 102 in the House, we, in an effort to move the budget process forward, passed the budget on July the 14th that focused on making sure that we maintain the priorities that we have in our caucus, which is making sure that we move forward with education funding and making the down payment that is necessary and continue the down payment that is necessary to get us into a place where we're complying with the Constitution of this Commonwealth, knowing that we have a Commonwealth Court ruling that says that how we funded education in this Commonwealth has been unconstitutional. We made a step on that last budget cycle. We're looking to continue that. So the budget that we passed on July the 14th continued that commitment. We passed a budget that continued our commitment to some of the most vulnerable in our communities with regards to Medicaid funding and with regards to making sure that there's health care for people in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So we passed our budget on July the 14th, and we sent it over to the state Senate. They came back into session in August and sent us a budget that was last year's numbers. I'm not making this up. State Senate of Pennsylvania, the Republican-controlled state Senate, sent us a budget that was already late, but that was a copy and paste of last year's budget. House Rules Committee met, and that my committee met. We did the budget in my committee, and we voted that down. And here's why. We were already at that point 6, almost 7 weeks late. and the Republican-controlled state Senate sent us a copy and paste document of last year. And so that was unacceptable. And here's why it's unacceptable. There was, when you look at the inflation rate from last year to this year, and the cost of carrying, just like you and your electric bill might go up, or your gas bill goes up, or your phone bill goes up, or your insurance cost goes up, the state's goes up as well, to the tunes of billions of dollars. And so for us to accept a budget with last year's numbers means that we're actually cutting money to many of the most vital services that we have across this Commonwealth. And quite honestly, we were just not ready to do that. And so we did vote that budget down in my committee. Okay. Whoa, that was an interesting comment. I'm going to keep going. And so I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought on that comment. And so we did not want, we voted that down because it wasn't a serious budget. And so where are we today? Anybody who knows that mass transit is extremely important to us in the Commonwealth. It is not just a Philadelphia issue. It is a statewide issue. I know when we talk about mass transit, people talk about SEPTA, Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority, but we also got to talk about PRT, Pittsburgh Regional Transit Authority, or you got to talk about Atlanta up in the Lehigh County, Lehigh Valley, and all of the other mass transit agencies that need resources. And so we have been steadfast and focused on making sure that we fully fund our schools, but also that we tackle the issue of mass transit in this budget. And so I hope, it is my hope that in the very, very near future, we will be able to have a spending plan that holds fast to our priorities and moves the Commonwealth forward. We are not happy about the situation that we're in currently, but we believe so very much in the future of our children and the funding that they need. We believe so much in mass transit, understanding it's how many of our kids get to school, it's how many of our seniors get to the doctors, and as many of our folks get back and forth to work, that we must get these things done. And so I'm going to stop there. We could jump right on into questions. I know people have real questions about what's going on. I want to be very open and answer as many questions as possible. I appreciate everything.
Let me get to a couple questions then that were submitted already. One of the questions is from our friend Sonia, who's asking, why can't schools be funded while this impasse is worked out? I think that's a procedural question.
Thanks for your question, Sonia. Let me be very clear. It is not lost on me or any of my colleagues around the significance of the delay that we see in this situation. From a procedural perspective, two things happen. We have to authorize how much money is going to be spent or invested, I should actually say, in education every year. And then we have to agree on the formula by which those dollars will be driven out to different school districts. And so all of that is put into the budget and negotiated every year. So it would, we do something on last year's numbers. The problem with that is if there is a cut or something of that nature, then you might get into a situation where folks be required to send money back, and we just wouldn't be able to get into that. What I do know that does typically happen is that a lot of what the school districts are using now is a part of the local share of the resources that they get. And so because of that, many of those school districts are spending down the local share of their appropriations that comes from local tax dollars. And so now because we're in September, is when you get to the place where many of those folks who may have reduced local shares are now looking and depending on the state to put in their money. It is it is one of the reasons why we're here, is because we are fighting for the education spend that we think our children deserve, and we haven't been doing that according to the Commonwealth Court, and we believe we have a constitutional responsibility to do that.
Thank you so much for that question, and thanks for helping us make some sense out of that. Another question that we received here is from our friend Jeff, who is with the Centers for Independent Living in Pennsylvania. Jeff noted that two of the state-funded Centers for Independent Living, and there are, I believe he noted that there were 9 of 16 Pennsylvania Centers for Independent Living that are state-funded. 2 of those have temporarily closed, one in Lehigh Valley, one in Bucks County, and laid off staff just earlier this week. So, yeah, obviously there are some impacts that happen for folks in those situations. I mean, this is just one of many ways that this budget impasse is creating problems for a whole host of different really critical needs that we have here in Pennsylvania. I'm going to go to a couple of the questions, and I think, Adrian, you've had folks submitting them directly to you, so thank you for that. Thanks for helping us try to clean this up a little bit. One of the questions that Adrian received, that someone submitted directly to her, was, have the negotiations made any further progress? How far apart are we right now?
So I'm I won't reveal any private conversations that folks are having, and I don't want to say how far apart. Here's what I will say: the governor and my caucus have had a proposal on the table for maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks now. I think that has been definitely reported in the paper, so I will share that. We have been very clear on what we're willing to negotiate with. I will tell you that negotiations and conversations continue to go on. I will tell you that I had meetings this morning with my some of my fellow leaders. I can tell you that there are more meetings this afternoon, and that we are very much still in conversation. I don't want to say we're close and then people be looking at us next week and seeing what's going on. Here's what I will say: there has not been the good thing is that there has not been a breakdown of communication to where people are not talking. People are very much talking in both chambers, on both sides of the aisle, trying to figure out what folks can get votes for in their caucus to get this budget done.
Thanks so much for that information. Another question that we received here was, how can the public communicate their anger that the legislatures are being paid while they refuse to do their job?
Well, I would push back on the notion that the legislature is refusing to do their job. I've been doing my job every day, and quite honestly, I'm doing my job right now by talking to all of you and informing you on where we are. I do think that if folks want to reach out to their elected officials, they should do just that. And they can reach out. All of us have web pages that have email addresses. All of us have offices that folks can call. And quite honestly, there are many times where I read first of all, I read the emails that I get. I try to read as many as possible. And there are many times where if you live in my district and I read your email, you'll get a phone call from me to sit and talk about what you sent on your email. So I think if you don't think folks actually read those emails, I want you to know many of us do. I think I saw one of my colleagues actually in the group today, Representative Derisha Parker, and she could tell you that we talk about the emails that we get. So I encourage folks to send emails or call the offices of their legislators to let them know how they feel about where we are. Here's what I will say, though. Our caucus, one of the reasons why we don't have a budget is because we would not agree to a cut in some of the areas that many of you on this call are very concerned about. We're not willing to cut some of the most vulnerable folks who are here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that's one of the things that we haven't been willing to compromise on.
Thanks so much. And an important reminder that our legislature and our legislators are always working, even when we face challenges with the budget. Another question we received, person submits a question and says, for me, living in a district that has representatives and senators who have been generally supportive of pushing for school and transit funding, it often feels like I don't have any sway or leverage in moving things forward. That is, representatives don't want to talk to people who are not their constituents, and those whom I have access to as their constituents are already doing what they can. How can people in this situation advocate effectively?
So one of the things that I always suggest, that's a very good question, and I totally get it. If you have a state rep or senator who is very supportive, you're like, well, I don't want to call them and email them because they're doing what I want them to do. But many of you have friends who do not live in those districts. Call your friends and tell your friends to call their elected officials in whose districts they live in. I also tell people to use the power of what they have in their hands. Most people on here have a Facebook, Instagram. Some of you are TikTokers and have TikTok. Look, use all of those tools to get a message out to people who may not necessarily live in the same area you do about what's going on. I tell people all the time, members do listen. I know sometimes it seems like some of our members don't, but I'm telling you, when I'm sitting in the rooms with colleagues and we're talking, we are talking about how many emails we got on a particular topic or how many phone calls we've gotten to our office or different things of that nature. So I'm telling you, these things work. So if you have friends who live in other parts of Pennsylvania that their members are not necessarily as supportive of public education or mass transit, pick up the phone and call them and tell them to call their legislator. Tell them to call friends that live in that area and do that. I mean, I know that there's some organizations that have organized actions where people are going out and door knocking in different parts of Pennsylvania to raise awareness about what needs to happen. I think that all of those activities are important. Listen, we get the democracy that we work for. And if you have an elected official, like if you live in my district, you don't necessarily have to call me about education funding because I'm there with you. You don't have to call me about SEPTA because I'm there with you. But if you want to be involved and active, there are lots of other ways that I think folks should be involved and active because this is hands-on right now on where we are in this budget impasse. So folks need to know the significance of what inactivity is doing.
Good reminder to be talking with friends and family who live in other parts of Pennsylvania and encouraging them to raise their voices as well. Thanks so much for that question, and thank you for that clear answer on that. Another question that we received is, what are the red lines that Democrats are following in budget negotiations? And then the person followed up with a specific question and said, what won't you negotiate on related to the budget?
So I don't want to, a big part of negotiation is not necessarily sharing that kind of stuff, Wiley. Here's where I would say, I think the priorities that we have as a caucus, we've been very public about. We've been very public about our support for mass transit. We've been very public about our need for education funding. We've been very, very public about where we stand on Medicaid and Medicaid cuts. Understanding what has happened in Washington, D.C. and how when they don't do things in D.C., how that comes back on us. Now, I want to be very clear on stuff like that. There are some things we will not be able to fill the gap on just because financially we can't afford to do it as a state with regards to some of the cuts that are happening at the federal government. But I think where we are as a caucus and the things that are a priority for us have been are very public. We've been very direct. Folks know exactly where we are on it. We need money for our schools. We need money for mass transit. We need a way to fund mass transit. And we need to make sure that we're not kicking people off of their health care. Those are things that are extremely important to our caucus. Now, here's what I will say. We remain nimble. We have 102 members. And so we don't like to give ultimatums, but we will tell you where we stand and what's important to us.
Thanks so much. Another question was submitted. I guess it's a little bit more of a speculative question. Are there any Republican legislators that are on the fence about the proposed budget that we might be able to reach out to and try to convince them how important it is?
Well, I mean, when we've passed mass transit funding the last couple of times, there have been Republicans that voted for it in the state house. And so I think those folks hearing and reminding them of what's important, I think that's helpful. I think you have Republicans who are in the SEPTA area and region who are in the state Senate. I think it's wise to reach out to them and let them know on what's important to you and important to folks that live in their districts. I think those things are extremely helpful with getting the message across that this is something that, it's not a nice to have, it's a must have.
Thanks so much for the question, and thanks so much for taking that answer. I don't see any more questions here yet. I know that it's a little trickier now so that we're having folks send those questions directly to Adrian. We'll continue to take those questions. So if you have those, please submit those to Adrian, and then I will be getting those, and we'll be addressing as many of those as we can. I really want to thank Chairman Harris for taking the time to be with us here today. I want to apologize again sincerely. Obviously, we didn't want to see that happen, and just an embarrassing day here for that issue. So I would suggest that we maybe go and take a little bit of more input from Shirlee and from Gillian. We'll take some more questions if you're able to stay with us. Chairman Harris, we'd love to have more questions coming in. We'll pose as many of those as we can. We did want to talk a little bit specifically about some of the issues related to school funding and then issues related to public transit. So I'm going to turn it over to Shirlee Howe from Children First to talk a bit about some of the school funding issues.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. And thank you, Chairman Harris. I'm glad you're still here for a couple minutes because it kind of answers one of the questions posed that what should I do if I live in an area where my legislators are supportive of public school funding, and it's pick up the phone and write an email and say thank you. I recognize many names on this call. You know your legislators, keep in communication with them and thank them because honestly, leadership in the House, Speaker McClinton, Chairman Harris, Majority Leader Bradford have kept the caucus together and voted for a strong public education funding budget. So we thank you very much for your efforts and thank you for being here today. The work of PA Schools Work is a coalition that we're proud of. It's how we know you and how we know many of our legislators throughout the state. We work with statewide partners, including Penn Policy. Also, Education Voters. I recognize many names from Education Voters, Teach Plus, Education Law Center, Public Interest Law Center are part of the coalition, in addition to many grassroots organizations which are critical to our mobilization efforts and something that Jeff asked me to speak about today, because a lot of people during this budget impasse are asking what are the things that we can do. And PA Schools Work, just a little bit of inside baseball. We meet every day at 4 o'clock to share intel that we've heard or actions that we're taking in our own regions. A lot of the organizations that work as part of this coalition work throughout the state, but many of us are regional. We work here in the Southeast. And just to give you an idea of some of the things that are still moving and working through PA Schools Work and through our partners, are local actions and local press conferences. We had a virtual press conference yesterday with two superintendents from different parts of the state. One of them in our region was Superintendent Stephen Rodriguez from Pottstown School District. It's an underfunded adequacy district, in addition to New Kensington Arnold, and their superintendent was on that virtual press call. Just today in Chester County, we had a roundtable and we brought together legislators, school board members, and also school superintendents to talk with each other. Back again to what Chairman Harris said about what's important to do during this budget impasse period. It's for us to reach out and talk with our legislators, and they do take that information back. Chairman Harris does pick up the phone and call people. Many other legislators do. They had questions that they were specifically asking of the school superintendents in their district. Is this something you see? What are policy, moving forward, what policy fixes could we make? How is this affecting your school districts now as the doors are open and your students are back to school? And the districts are not all the same. They look different. In Chester County, just talking about the roundtable this morning, Coatesville, Downingtown, and Avon-Grove are adequacy districts. And then there were 4 others at the table that are not. They were speaking with one voice. Their superintendents were there speaking to, we had 2 of the state senators who represent those areas, in addition to 4 state legislators. So that's the type of thing that organizations can do. But I know the question becomes, what can I as an individual do? And, you know, for those of you in blue areas, it's important to keep in contact and say thank you. We are trying to do that as a campaign as well. But one of our most recent strategies that we've started doing prior to the Labor Day weekend, and also now, is short video clips that people are making. Regular individual people are making. They're not, you don't have to be a superintendent, a legislator, a school board, or, you know, school board member to make this video. Why is properly funding the school district in my community and other communities important? Why is it important to me? What difference does it make for my student? And what difference does it make for our communities collectively? And that was a lot of the talk at the roundtable this morning about we want strong schools in our own community, but it's so important for us to have strong schools in all of the communities that surround where we live and throughout our state. It's something that the legislators spoke about, in addition to school board members specifically. We forget those are volunteer positions, and long meetings, long hours, you know, lots of folks grabbing you in the grocery store. Why you keep raising my taxes? You know, those types of things. And they're on the front lines of this, and we're doing everything that we can to help engage more stakeholders. Many of you are involved in this work, so I don't have to, you know, it's not a 101 type of thing, but I will drop a couple of links for PA Schools work. If you're not signed up to, you know, be a member of PA Schools work and receive occasional outreach from PA Schools work, I would say do that first thing. The other thing is that we very clearly have it lined out how to make that short video clip. We're receiving dozens of them throughout the state, and we were putting this out a couple days before the Labor Day weekend. We were hoping to get some of the, you know, some of our messaging was, you're going to be around families, you're going to be around kids that you love, even if your own kids have graduated from schools. I have 2 college-age kids and 1 out of college, so I feel further removed from this. But one of my sons with an IEP made a clip. So, you know, everybody has a child who either went to public schools, are currently in public schools. You love a kid who's in a public school, and it's why you're on this call. So I will drop, oh, thank you, Jeff. Yep, that's the PA Schools Work website, and it's really easy to navigate. There are 4 buttons across the top. The first one says join the work. That's how you can join up to sign up for the communications in your email. PA budget is that's the button that will lead you directly to making a video clip. And School Funding 101 has some great information and one-pagers that our campaign comms folks put together, very informative, and those are easy to print so that you can take them with you as you go to community events or educate others in your book club. Or, you know, this is just such an important issue. It affects so many children's lives, and it affects so many families. Over 90% of the children in Pennsylvania attend public schools. So we're just so thankful that the House and the governor has kept this top of mind. So our advocacy efforts are aimed at the Senate at this point to keep public school funding top of mind and to make it a priority in this year's budget and to get the money flowing into school districts, because it's having real impacts, not just those that are adequacy districts that need a little bit more, but also better resource districts. And that's something we heard today too. I'm sorry, I will wrap up quickly, but just one more thing. In our region, Senator Carney from Delaware County is having an action at the Lansdowne Trolley Stop tomorrow, Friday, September 5th at 11 o'clock. They'll be there. They're going to be focusing on education, public school funding, and also SEPTA. And then we work in collaboration with Power Interfaith. I know that many of you are familiar with Power Interfaith. They are doing an action Friday, September 12th, so next week at 10 a.m., and they're doing that at Senator Martin's office in Strasburg. So just those two things. So please know that in addition to what everyone on this call is doing, I see many of you who work in the offices and work in this space. So thanks for joining us today. I think it was helpful to hear what Chairman Harris said about budget negotiations. Same, we don't really have any more information other than our job as advocates and is to invite as many other advocates into the fold as we push for what we need for our schools and our kids. So thanks so much for having me, Jeff. And I'll put a link. It goes directly to that video clip portion of the PA Schools website to make it a little easier. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Shirley, and we really appreciate all the information that you brought. And if we can get folks involved in doing some of these video clips, we would love to get more involvement in that. So we'll look for that in the chat here as well. I'm going to turn it over now to Gillian Kratzer, the Deputy Director at Better Pennsylvania, to talk a little bit about some of the transit issues that they've been working on.
Great, thanks so much, Jeff. And also just quickly, I saw a question in the chat, can the legislature approve a temporary budget? No, we don't have continuing resolutions, unfortunately. But so hi. You know, I think obviously we all know that one of the biggest issues, and certainly the most talked about, has been transit in terms of our budget. And a lot of that attention has been focused on SEPTA, which, you know, frankly, there's a reason why SEPTA is the largest transit authority in Pennsylvania, and it serves millions of people. So, you know, I think it's very clear why, you know, that would be a statewide concern, you know, even in terms of the Pennsylvania economy. But the unfortunate thing is that what gets missed a lot, and it gets missed because, to be very frank, there are, you know, Republican state senators and Republican state representatives who don't want to focus on the fact that when they are talking about cutting transit funding, they're talking about throwing their own constituents under the bus, as it were. And so, you know, with Better PA, Pennsylvanians Together, with the help of the very fantastic Transit for All PA and other organizations, we put together a rural transit toolkit to help folks talk about transit in these other areas of the state that we don't hear about it very often. You know, and I think that it is important. One of the things that we wanted to do, frankly, in a way to, you know, support our brothers and sisters and siblings in southeastern Pennsylvania, is to point out the hypocrisy and the damage, the hypocrisy of Republican legislators, and more specifically the damage that they will do by cutting so much transit funding, because it doesn't just mean you know, fare increases and service cuts in, you know, in southeastern Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. It means that for a lot of other people in the rest of the state. Certainly Pittsburgh, of course, is, you know, I would imagine our second largest transit authority, but the rest of the Commonwealth, you know, even where there are places in Pennsylvania where they do not have a bus system, they still have paratransit for folks with disabilities. They still have transit for elderly folks to get to appointments, to get to doctor's appointments, to the store, through rideshare. And I think what was being asked was not in any way unreasonable. And Connor, I think Connor Deschmaker's here, so he can tell Adrian to correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe the request, the transit package that was being asked for would return transit funding to 2019 levels plus 10%, return it to 2019 levels, which is ridiculous. And so, you know, what does that look like, right? One of the things that, you know, we want to make sure that every legislator, even these ones, these rural areas, are understanding is that what they're doing is hurting their constituents. So Kim Ward, State Senate Pro Tem, President Pro Tem Kim Ward, represents part of Westmoreland County. Westmoreland County has a bus system. Westmoreland County has, you know, paratransit, transit for the elderly, and that is all needed. And I would also add that within the last year or so, the Westmoreland bus system had a facility expansion that was completed. And so it is not also as though her district has not benefited from transit funding in other ways. The same goes for Joe Pittman. Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman represents, among other counties, Indiana County, Indigo, which is Indiana County's adorably named transit system, also had a facility expansion. And that's good, and they should. But, you know, Senator Kim Ward was literally quoted in the Philadelphia Inquirer telling Democrats not to politicize this issue because it affects their constituents more than the Republicans. And that's simply untrue. You know, and for many reasons, you know, I think that there are a lot of statistics that I can give. And for me, I think one of the most telling is that the ATA of North Central PA, that transit authority, it covers North Central Pennsylvania, Potter County, Potter, Cameron, a couple other counties in the north, and 45% of their ridership rides the bus to go to work. 44% rides it 5 or more times a day, 5 or more times a week. And so that is not, this is not going to not affect people in rural areas. It is incredibly important that for those of us who live in those areas, that we let our legislators know that this is something that they need to fix, not for Philadelphia. And I will note as well that when they often talk about SEPTA, they focus very specifically on Philadelphia, again, despite the fact that SEPTA covers all of southeastern Pennsylvania. And there's a reason for that. It's racism. But, you know, people, they need to understand that their own constituents are so affected by this. And that, you know, if you look at even at per capita spending on transit across the county, you know, in Center County, per capita spending is similar to what it is in southeastern Pennsylvania. Also in Lawrence County, similar to what it is. Lawrence County is, if you are not familiar, the whole way over in the west on the Ohio border, around the same as per capita spending in SEPTA, in the SEPTA area, but you will not see Senator Elder Vogel mention that, despite the fact that he covers part of that county, because he's too busy allowing this to be about SEPTA when it's about all of us. And so, you know, I think what's important for us, what we sort of discussed amongst us is, you know, number one, I do want to lift up that Transit for All PA has been doing some really, really amazing work across the state. I jumped into this late to the game. And I think that, if you go to transitforallpa.org, you can see some of the stuff that they're doing. There are, a few different meetings that you can check out. Truly, truly important work to get involved in. And I think my last thing really is just to sort of drive home the importance of this transit is almost especially in a rural area, transit for the elderly and for people with disabilities is a healthcare issue. Because if you can't get to your doctor's appointment, if you can't get to a hospital for a test, that impacts your health adversely. For a person who is already in a vulnerable position, and we're in a position here in more rural Pennsylvania where small hospitals are closing and will continue to close because of massive Medicaid cuts. And, there are a couple counties with no hospital. So this is something that is really, really important. So, if you're interested in checking out the toolkit, you are absolutely welcome to email me. I could send it out. I was going to link it in the chat, but I think I'm not going to do that now. But yes, Adrian can, I think, probably send out my contact information afterwards. You're welcome to get in touch, and I'm happy to share that. The amazing research in it is, things that were put together from, again, Transit for All PA, the fantastic researchers at Penn Policy Center. And in it, we talk about, framing for how we're talking about this. It's about all of us. That's the really important part. And, also give you some sample letters to the editor if you'd like to write one. Big thanks to Dwayne Heisler from Penn Policy Center on that. And it's all in there. So please, again, feel free to reach out. We would love to share it. And hopefully you can reach out to your legislator and let them know that it's time to fund transit for everybody.
Thanks, Gillian. You invited Connor from Transit for All PA to jump in and make some comments.
I did. Yes.
We have Connor here, and we've set it up so that Connor can speak if you would like to join us in the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I won't take up too much time. Gillian laid out everything excellently. I'll address just a couple of the questions that I see in the chat. The one that it's not just SEPTA. Gillian did an excellent job of painting that picture for all of y'all. I think a specific action, I've talked with Mark Steer and I know Mark had done some, I guess, like calls to engage voters in some certain districts. And so I'd be curious if there's more opportunity there. But I can say from the Transit for All PA side, we're hosting phone banks every single Tuesday. So every Tuesday at noon, if you just go to our website on the Take Action page, that's where you'll be able to sign up for those weekly phone banks. My colleague Stephen, who runs the Transit Forward Philadelphia group, a separate organization based in the Philly region, has been canvassing in person. They're actually right now about to be on their way to the Eagles home opener to be canvassing folks that are attending that game. Then regarding the question about the revenue plan that we developed, the way we're sort of framing that right now is that we need to get out of like absolute emergency crisis as soon as possible. And then what we're going to do is take, 5 days or a week, and then we're going to keep going because that's the way it's been for the last 2 years, right? 3 years, really, is we, organized for the budget last summer. They gave us a stopgap. We took a week. Then we started fighting for flex funding. Then flex funding happened. We took a week off, and then we kept rolling into this next budget fight. I can say that our funding proposal went far beyond our dreams of just being a white paper. It has been introduced in full in both the House and the Senate. There are about 24 sponsors in of each bill in the House, and about a dozen or so in the Senate side. So that's where we'll be putting our focus for those permanent long-term solutions. And I'll note that one of the last bills that passed the House did include a new transportation sort of revenue options commission-like group that would get us on a path to actual permanent solutions, because our funding proposal is one that was sourced from the Republican Representative Martina White's menu of options back in 2021. So everything that we're doing is stuff that is, been bipartisan in origin. And also, when we talk about things like a rideshare tax and fee, you want to know who has a statewide rideshare tax? Kentucky. So we're, looking at things that are really, very feasible. And we're, very, very hopeful about where this can go. And then the last question that I'll see here is there, some of these funding agreements. So as Gillian mentioned, it's all of us or it's none of us. We cannot let, I'll try not to name names here, but we cannot let weak Democrats and Republicans be peeling off constituencies here. We cannot let there be, Uber's giving us $10,000 of free rides for seniors. We cannot let FanDuel sponsoring 1 day of service for, Eagles fans be something that buys us off. We cannot let this Philadelphia mayor basically providing prepayment to schools be something that buys us off. All of these things serve to weaken us. So the more we focus on the only question that matters, is there more money for transit or not? That's the only question that needs to be asked every time you see a court injunction. Hell, is the latest thing that came up. So they're forcing SEPTA to spend down their reserves to $0. That's not a solution. That's making us bankrupt ourselves faster. So the only question folks need to ask anytime that a new news story comes up from some bad actor is there more funding for transit or the same or less? And right now, it's the same or less. So keep that rhetoric alive for folks as people ask you questions about, well, what about this thing? What about this thing? Did they pass a budget with more money? If the answer is no, then that's the answer. So I'm sorry that took a little longer than I hoped, but a lot of stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Connor, and thanks for chiming in. And I appreciate you going and pulling those questions out of the chat. It actually saved a little time for me having to pull them out and ask them. And again, thank you for all the work you do with Transit for All PA. Thank you, Gillian. Thank you, Shirlee, for the work that you do. Thank you for participating in our meeting today. Big thank you again to Chairman Harris, who had to leave early to go to another appointment. Thank you to all of you for bearing with us here. This was a little bit of a challenging one. We're dealing with some new security settings on Zoom as we follow up from this meeting. Again, 2 weeks from today, we will be hosting the Federal Policy Action Zoom meeting at 1 p.m. My colleague, Dwayne Heisler from Pennsylvania Policy Center, will be helping to facilitate that. Dwayne, I don't know if you wanted to drop the link for folks to register in the chat for that, or we can get that around to folks after the meeting.
Yeah, we can follow up with it later.
All right. Again, thanks so much, everybody. We still have a ways to go to get a budget in place. We obviously need one badly. We're seeing the consequences of it. Thank you for all the work you all do to educate yourselves and to advocate and to help educate your friends, family, and folks all across Pennsylvania. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.